Ambassador Kim Jin-woo stood in the center of the massive council chamber, watching the holographic votes appear one by one above each delegation. Red, red, red. Every single vote glowed crimson against humanity's petition for aid. His throat felt dry as dust as the final tally appeared: 847 votes against, 0 votes in favor. Complete abandonment. Counselor Velthara rose from her crystalline throne, her 6 arms spreading wide as she addressed the chamber. Her species had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years, and her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The Void Swarm advances toward the Outer Rim territories, she announced, her words echoing off the dome-shaped walls. Our analysis indicates a 97% probability that the creatures will consume the human colonies within 6 standard cycles. However, this sacrifice will provide the core worlds with adequate time to prepare stronger defenses. Jin-woo felt his legs shake. He had served as Earth's ambassador for 15 years, had negotiated trade deals and peace treaties, had built relationships with dozens of alien species. None of that mattered now. Honored Counselor, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Humanity has contributed to this alliance for over 2 centuries. We have shared our technology, our resources, our people. Surely that earns us some consideration? A sound like grinding glass filled the chamber as Velthara laughed. Ambassador, your species has existed in space for barely 300 of your years. The youngest member of this council has civilizations dating back 50,000 years. Your contribution, while noted, is insignificant compared to the greater good. Around the chamber, other species murmured their agreement. The tall, blue-skinned Altrans nodded their elongated heads. The insectoid Kreks clicked their approval. Even the peaceful Zendari, who had once called humans their closest allies, remained silent. Jin-woo activated his personal communicator with trembling fingers. The device connected him directly to Admiral Park Min-ho aboard the flagship Terran Hope, currently stationed at the edge of Council space. Admiral, Jin-woo whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. They've abandoned us. Every single species voted against providing aid. We're on our own. 300 light-years away, Admiral Park Min-ho received the transmission while standing on the bridge of humanity's most advanced warship. The Terran Hope was impressive by human standards but looked like a toy compared to the massive Council dreadnoughts that were already withdrawing toward the galactic core. Min-ho was a veteran of the Centauri Wars and the Proxima Rebellion. At 52 years old, he had gray streaking through his black hair and scars on his hands from countless battles. But he had never faced anything like the Void Swarm. Around him, his senior officers waited for his response. Commander Lee Deun, his second-in-command, stood at attention beside the tactical console. At 38, she was brilliant and brave, having risen through the ranks faster than almost anyone in human military history. Captain Cho Sung-min commanded the ship's marine forces. He was younger than the others at 29, but his record spoke for itself. No one had survived more ground combat missions in hostile territory. Navigation Officer Bae Soo-jin was only 25 but had the best spatial awareness of anyone in the fleet. She could plot jump coordinates in her head faster than most computers could calculate them. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up the Council evacuation, Soo-jin reported, her voice barely steady. 17 dreadnought fleets are withdrawing to the core systems. They're leaving the entire Outer Rim undefended. Min-ho stared at the main view screen, which showed Earth growing smaller in the distance. Humanity's birth world looked so peaceful from space, a blue and white marble floating in the darkness. Soon, it might be nothing but empty space, consumed by creatures from beyond the galaxy's edge. What are our options, Commander Lee? Min-ho asked. Deun consulted her tactical display. We have 237 ships of various classes, Admiral. Most are converted civilian vessels with basic weapons. Against the Void Swarm. She paused, unwilling to voice what they all knew. We don't stand a chance, finished Captain Sung-min bluntly. Every species that's encountered these creatures has been completely wiped out. Entire star systems just gone. Eaten. The smart move would be to evacuate as many people as possible and retreat toward the core worlds, Deun added. Maybe the Council will accept human refugees if we abandon our colonies. Min-ho was quiet for a long moment, considering their options. Through the view screen he could see other human ships in formation around them. Transport vessels packed with families. Cargo haulers converted into makeshift warships. Research vessels whose scientists had volunteered to fight instead of flee. These ships represented everything humanity had built in space. 3 centuries of exploration, colonization, and progress. Behind them lay dozens of human worlds, billions of people who had trusted their government to protect them. Navigation Officer Bay, Minho said finally. Plot a course for the Void Incursion Zone. Maximum speed. Sujin's eyes widened. Sir? That's directly toward the enemy. I heard the Admiral correctly, Doon said, understanding immediately. We're not running away. But sir, Sungmin protested, even if we could somehow fight these creatures, we have nowhere to retreat to if things go badly. Minho turned to face his officers, and they saw something in his expression that made them straighten their shoulders. It was not hope, exactly, but something harder and more dangerous. Captain, for 300 years, every time humanity has faced impossible odds, we've done the same thing. We've walked straight into the fire and found a way to win. The Council thinks we're weak because we're young and small. But they've never seen what humans do when we're cornered. He activated the fleet-wide communications channel, connecting him to every ship in the human formation. All ships, this is Admiral Minho. We face the darkness alone, but we do not face it afraid. Signal all human colonies to begin evacuation procedures, but know this, we are not running away from this fight. We are going straight through it. The end. 3 weeks had passed since the Council's betrayal, and the human fleet now floated at the edge of something that defied understanding. Where star charts showed the Altaran system should be, there was only empty black space. Not the normal darkness between stars, but an absolute void that seemed to swallow light itself. Admiral Park Minho stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, studying readings that made no scientific sense. The ship had been renamed after they left Council space. The old name, Terran Hope, felt too optimistic for what they were about to face. Report, Dr. Han, Minho said to his chief science officer. Dr. Han Ji-hoon looked up from his instruments, his face pale. At 41 he was one of humanity's brightest minds, with degrees in quantum physics and xenobiology. But nothing in his education had prepared him for this. Admiral, our sensors are detecting massive energy signatures ahead, but they're unlike anything we've ever encountered. The readings suggest something alive, but on a scale that's... He paused, searching for words. Sir, we're looking at organisms the size of moons. Around the bridge, the crew worked with nervous energy. Everyone knew they were flying toward certain death, but no one suggested turning back. Commander Lee Doon stood at her usual position beside the tactical display, monitoring their small fleet status. Commander, what's our current strength? Minho asked. Doon touched her console, bringing up a holographic display of their forces. 200 ships remaining, Admiral. We lost 37 during the journey here to mechanical failures and 1 ship that simply disappeared during a jump. Most of our vessels are civilian craft we've converted for combat. She gestured to specific icons on the display. The cargo hauler New Beijing now carries 16 plasma cannon arrays. The passenger liner Golden Dragon has been fitted with missile tubes along its entire hull. Even the research vessel Discovery is armed with experimental energy weapons. It's not much firepower compared to a Council battle fleet, added Captain Cho Sung-min from his position at the security station. But it's everything humanity has. Suddenly, Communications Officer Kim So-rae looked up from her station with alarm. At 23, she was the youngest officer on the bridge, but her skill with alien communication systems was unmatched. Admiral, I'm receiving emergency transmissions from the outer edge of what used to be Altaran space, she reported, her voice shaking. The signals are weak and broken, but I can make out some words. Put it through the speakers, Minho ordered. The bridge filled with static, then a terrified voice speaking in the melodic language of the Altarans. So-rae worked quickly to translate the alien words into human speech through the computer. They're saying, the hunger comes from nowhere. It eats our thoughts before it eats our bodies. The fear makes it stronger. Every ship that runs feeds it more power. Cannot escape. Cannot fight. Can only scream. The transmission cut to static. Dr. Ji-hoon looked up from his analysis. Admiral, if these readings are correct, the void creatures aren't just consuming physical matter. They're somehow feeding on emotional energy. Fear, terror, despair, these emotions are literally making the creatures grow stronger. That explains why every species that encounters them gets completely wiped out, Doon realized. The more afraid they become, the more powerful their enemies get. It's a feedback loop. Minho considered this information carefully. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Through the main view screen they could see strange distortions in space ahead, like reality itself was being bent and twisted. Dr. Han, what kind of emotional energy do humans typically produce when facing impossible odds? The Admiral asked. The scientist thought for a moment. Well, sir, fear is certainly common. But humans also tend to respond with anger, determination, even excitement. We're one of the few species that sometimes becomes more aggressive when cornered rather than more afraid. And what effect might that have on creatures that feed on terror? Theoretically, it might be like feeding them poison instead of food. Minho smiled grimly and activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice carried to every human ship spread across several light minutes of space. All ships, this is Admiral Minho. We've learned something important about our enemy. These creatures grow stronger by feeding on fear and despair. Every species that's faced them has been consumed because they ran in terror. He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. Each face showed determination rather than panic. But we're not like other species. When humans face a monster, we don't just run. We get angry. We fight back. We find a way to win even when winning seems impossible. Through the fleet communication channel, he could hear captains and crew members responding with grim laughter and determined shouts. Prepare for first contact with the enemy. Remember, we're not prey swimming toward a predator. We're hunters who just haven't met our match yet. As the human fleet accelerated toward the edge of void space, their sensors began detecting movement in the absolute darkness ahead. Massive shapes stirred in the emptiness where stars used to shine. But something unprecedented happened as the creatures became aware of the approaching humans. Instead of rushing forward to feed, they hesitated. For the first time in their existence, the void swarm encountered minds that responded to mortal danger not with terror, but with rage. The creatures had consumed countless civilizations across millions of years. They had devoured the fear of species so advanced they could manipulate time itself. But they had never tasted the fury of cornered humans who refused to give up. And that taste was apparently very bitter indeed. The end. 6 months had passed since humanity first entered void territory, and Phoenix Station now stood as a monument to human stubbornness. Built from the wreckage of destroyed ships and salvaged alien technology, the base floated in space where the Altaran home system used to exist. Marine Captain Yong Do-hyun crouched behind a piece of twisted metal that had once been part of an Altaran city. His squad moved carefully through the ruins of what was once a thriving world. Now it looked like something from a nightmare, with strange black growths covering everything and reality itself seeming bent in impossible ways. "Movement ahead, Captain," whispered Sergeant Yoon Hyejin through the communication system. At 28, she was one of the best scouts in the human military, able to move through dangerous territory without making a sound. Do-hyun raised his rifle and peered around the corner. 3 void hunters prowled through the ruins about 50 meters away. The creatures looked like living shadows with too many teeth, each one the size of a small building. They moved with fluid grace, searching for prey. "I count 3 hostiles," Do-hyun reported quietly to his team. "Standard engagement protocol. Yoon, take position on the right flank. Kim, you're with me on direct approach." But as the Marines prepared to attack, something strange happened. The void creatures suddenly stopped moving. They turned their eyeless heads toward the humans, seemed to sense something they didn't like and began backing away. "Sir," Yoon whispered in amazement, "they're retreating. The void hunters are actually running from us." Do-hyun had seen this behavior before, but it still surprised him every time. For millions of years, these creatures had been the ultimate predators. Nothing in the galaxy had ever made them back down. Until now. "Confirmed retreat," he reported into his radio. 3 hostiles withdrawing without engagement. "Phoenix Station, this is Ground Team 7. The pattern continues." Back on Phoenix Station, Dr. Han Ji-hoon received the report while working in his makeshift laboratory. The research facility was built inside what had been a cargo bay, filled with equipment salvaged from dozens of different ships. Ji-hoon had been studying the void creatures for months, trying to understand why they behaved so differently around humans. "Admiral, we need to discuss my latest findings," Ji-hoon said into his communicator. An hour later, Admiral Minho sat in the station's conference room with his senior staff. The room was small and cramped, with metal walls and basic furniture, but it served their needs. Commander Lee Do-eun sat to his right, while Captain Do-hyun had returned from his mission to attend the meeting. Also present was Intelligence Officer Nam Yi-won, a 30-year-old woman who had become their expert on intercepting alien communications. Her ability to decode and translate messages from across the galaxy had proven invaluable. "Doctor, what have you learned?" Minho asked. Ji-hoon activated a holographic display showing brain scans and energy readings. "Admiral, I've been studying the psychological and emotional patterns of our troops compared to data we've gathered about other species. The results are remarkable." He pointed to different colored areas on the brain scans. When most species encounter the void creatures, Their brains are flooded with fear chemicals. Terror, despair, hopelessness. These emotions create a specific type of psychic energy that the creatures literally consume for food. But humans are different? Dune asked. Completely different. When faced with mortal danger, human brains produce anger, determination, and what we might call fighting spirit. Instead of feeding the creatures, these emotions are actually toxic to them. Do-hyun leaned forward with interest. That explains why they keep backing away from us in combat. We're literally poisoning them just by being angry. It's more than that, Ji-hoon continued. Every human who dies fighting instead of running weakens the creatures in a permanent way. Our resistance is like an infection spreading through their collective consciousness. Nam Yi-won pulled up her own display showing intercepted communications from across the galaxy. Admiral, this ties into something I've been monitoring. The Council's safe core worlds are reporting massive increases in void activity. The display showed dozens of star systems under attack, all of them far from human space. Red icons indicated worlds under siege, while yellow markers showed refugee fleets trying to escape. The creatures are bypassing us completely, Yi-won explained. They're moving past our territory to attack the fleeing civilizations deeper in the galaxy. It's like they're avoiding us. Because we hurt them, Minho realized. They're going after easier prey. Exactly. The Krex Confederation lost 3 colony worlds last week. The Zendari Republic is evacuating their entire outer rim. Even the mighty Altaran Empire is falling back toward the galactic core. Ji-hoon added more data to his display. Admiral, I believe our presence in void space is creating a buffer zone. The creatures are afraid to pass through human territory because it weakens them. So they're taking longer routes around us to reach their preferred prey. Which means the Council's strategy of abandoning us has backfired, Doon said with satisfaction. By leaving us to face the void alone, they've actually made themselves bigger targets. Minho studied the tactical display, seeing the big picture for the first time. Humanity's small fleet was like a thorn in the side of an enormous beast. Not big enough to kill it, but painful enough to change its behavior. Dr. Han, what happens if we push deeper into void territory? Theoretically, the more humans we put in contact with these creatures, the more we poison their collective strength. We could potentially create a dead zone they can't cross. Then that's what we do, Minho decided. Signal all ships. We're not just surviving in hell anymore. We're making hell our home. Deep in the heart of void territory, where no living being had set foot for over 1,000,000 years, the human exploration team made a discovery that changed everything. Among the twisted remains of the first civilization ever consumed by the void, they found ruins that told a story of ultimate sacrifice. Dr. Han Ji-hoon knelt beside ancient stone carvings, his translation device working overtime to decode the alien script. The ruins belonged to a species so old that even their name was forgotten, but their final message was clear. Admiral, you need to see this, Ji-hoon said into his communicator, his voice filled with both excitement and dread. Within an hour, Admiral Minho had arrived at the site with a full team. The ruins sat on what had once been a planet but was now just a chunk of rock floating in the endless darkness of void space. Strange energy readings pulsed from deep underground. What did you find, Doctor? Minho asked as he examined the alien carvings. It's a warning, sir. And an instruction manual. Ji-hoon pointed to different sections of the carved stone. This civilization discovered the source of the void creatures. They call it the spawning nexus, a massive organic structure that creates new creatures and coordinates their attacks across the galaxy. Commander Lee Doon studied the alien symbols with her own translation device. According to this, the nexus is located about 50 kilometers below us, in what used to be this planet's core. The previous species tried to destroy it, Ji-hoon continued. They built a weapon specifically designed to collapse the nexus from within. But there was one problem. He pointed to a particularly detailed carving. The targeting system requires a living being to manually activate it. Someone has to stay behind to operate the controls. Captain Yong Do-hyun, who had been examining the military aspects of the ruins, looked up. Let me guess. They couldn't find anyone willing to die for the mission. Exactly. Their culture valued individual survival above all else. When they realized the mission was suicide, they abandoned the attempt. The void consumed them shortly after. Minho felt a chill run down his spine as he understood the implications. But the weapon is still here? The carvings suggest it's still functional, buried deep in the nexus structure itself. We would need to infiltrate the heart of void territory, fight our way through thousands of creatures, and then manually activate a weapon that would kill whoever operates it. The team stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the magnitude of the task. Around them, the twisted landscape of the dead world stretched to the horizon, a reminder of what failure meant. How long would we have once the weapon activates? Du-hyun asked. According to the specifications, about 30 seconds before total structural collapse. Not enough time to escape. Du-hyun stepped forward without hesitation. With respect, Doc, that's not a problem for us. Minho turned to look at his Marine captain. At 32 years old, Du-hyun had survived more combat missions than anyone in the fleet. He was married with 2 young children back on Earth, and he was volunteering to die. Captain, I understand your dedication, but... Sir, with permission to speak freely? Du-hyun interrupted. Every human in this fleet volunteered for what we knew was a suicide mission. We've been dead men and women walking since the day we entered void space. The only question is whether our deaths accomplish something meaningful. Behind Du-hyun, other members of the strike team began stepping forward. Sergeant Yoon Hye-jin moved to stand beside her captain. Count me in, sir. I've been following the captain into impossible situations for years. Not stopping now. Pilot Kang Min-jun joined them. At 26, he was the best shuttle pilot in the fleet, capable of flying through asteroid fields and hostile fire. Someone needs to get the team to the target. Might as well be me. Engineers Lim So-young and Oh Tae-ho stepped up together. They were a married couple who had worked as a team for over a decade, experts at making broken technology function under impossible conditions. If anyone can get that ancient weapon working, it's us, So-young said simply. Medic Shin Eun-bai joined the group. At 24, she was the youngest volunteer, but her medical skills had saved dozens of lives during their missions in void space. The team will need medical support during the infiltration. More volunteers continued stepping forward. Demolitions expert Park Ki-woo. Communications specialist Lee Min-ah. Heavy weapons operator Jang Se-hun. Within minutes, over 40 people had volunteered for certain death. Admiral Min-ho felt his chest tighten as he looked at the faces of his best people. These weren't just soldiers, they were the finest humanity had to offer. Scientists, engineers, pilots, medics. People with families and futures. I can't ask you to do this, he said, his voice barely steady. You're not asking, sir, Du-hyun replied firmly. We're volunteering. Someone needs to end this nightmare, and humans are apparently the only species stupid enough to try. The mission took 3 weeks to plan and execute. The infiltration was brutal beyond description. Void creatures swarmed the assault team from all directions, their psychic screams trying to break human minds with pure terror. But the humans pushed forward, their anger and determination poisoning every creature they encountered. Half the team died in the first hour. More fell as they fought their way deeper into the organic tunnels of the spawning nexus. The structure itself seemed alive, with walls that bled and corridors that tried to seal themselves shut. Captain Du-hyun, critically wounded from multiple creature attacks, finally reached the weapons control chamber deep in the nexus core. Around him, the massive organic structure pulsed with dark energy that had been growing for millions of years. With his last strength, he activated the ancient weapon. As the spawning nexus began to collapse around him, his final transmission reached the human fleet above. Tell them we walked into the fire and we won. The explosion could be seen across 3 star systems. As the nexus died, void creatures throughout the galaxy began weakening and collapsing. The million-year nightmare was finally ending. Admiral Park Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the stars through a view screen cracked from countless battles. The flagship bore scars from 6 months of fighting in void territory, hull plates welded over blast holes, weapon systems rebuilt from salvaged parts, and corridors still stained with the blood of heroes. The void spawning nexus was dead, destroyed by Captain Du-hyun's sacrifice, but its death had not brought peace. Instead, the surviving void creatures had gone into a final frenzy, like a wounded animal lashing out before it died. And they were no longer avoiding the safe council worlds. Admiral, Commander Lee De-eun called from her station. We're receiving an emergency transmission from council space. Priority channel. Min-ho turned from the view screen. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a figure that Min-ho barely recognized. Counselor Velthara, who had once sat on her crystalline throne with absolute authority, now looked broken. Her 6 arms trembled and cracks ran through her translucent skin like a shattered window. Admiral Min-ho, she began, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Our defensive lines are failing. The void creatures have broken through our outer perimeter and are consuming everything in their path. We formally request immediate human assistance. The bridge fell silent. Every officer present remembered the day the council had voted unanimously to abandon humanity. 847 votes against, 0 in favor. Complete betrayal when Earth needed help most. Our greatest fleets have been destroyed, Velthara continued, desperation creeping into her voice. The creatures seem stronger than before, more aggressive. They're targeting our core worlds, civilizations that have existed for 50,000 years are being wiped out in hours. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Minho could feel his officers waiting for his response, wondering what humanity would do now that their betrayers needed rescue. Communications Officer Kim Soare looked up from her station with a grim expression. Admiral, that's not the only distress call we're receiving. Emergency transmissions are coming in from across the galaxy. Her console displayed a star map covered in red warning signals. Each one represented a civilization under attack by the dying void creatures. The Altaran Republic has lost their home system, Soare reported. The Zenthari Federation is requesting evacuation assistance for their core worlds. The Kronos Collective is offering to share all their military technology in exchange for help. Those are the same species that voted to sacrifice us, observed Intelligence Officer Nam Yuan bitterly. Every single one of them chose to abandon humanity when we needed help. Dr. Han Ji-hoon, who had been monitoring the void creatures' behavior patterns, spoke up from his science station. Admiral, the death of the spawning nexus has made the remaining creatures incredibly aggressive. They're no longer following any coordinated strategy, they're just attacking everything they encounter. Minho studied the tactical display showing dozens of civilizations under siege. The Council's strategy of retreating to safe core worlds had backfired completely. By clustering together, they had made themselves perfect targets for the creature's final rampage. Sir, Commander Dune said quietly, we could let them burn. After what they did to us, no one would blame humanity for walking away. The idea had obvious appeal. Justice for their betrayal. Revenge for being abandoned. The logical response to species that had written off human lives as acceptable losses. But as Minho looked around his bridge, he saw something in his officers' faces that reminded him why they had volunteered for this mission in the first place. It wasn't hatred or revenge that had driven them into void space. It was the simple human instinct to protect others, even when those others didn't deserve it. Dr. Ji-hoon, Minho asked, how many human ships do we have left? 87 vessels in fighting condition, Admiral. Most are heavily damaged but still operational. And how many council worlds are under attack? Current count shows 43 star systems with active void incursions. The mathematics were brutal. 87 human ships against void creatures spread across dozens of star systems. Even with their advantage against the creatures, they would be stretched impossibly thin. Admiral, Dune said, understanding his thinking, we barely have enough ships to defend a handful of systems. We can't save everyone. No, Minho agreed. But we can try. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, connecting him to every human ship in their formation. Captains and crews who had followed him into the darkest regions of space, who had watched their friends die fighting impossible odds, who had every reason to hate the species now begging for help. All ships, this is Admiral Minho. We've received distress calls from across the galaxy. The same civilizations that abandoned us are now asking for our help. He paused, letting that sink in. I know what many of you are thinking. Why should we risk our lives for species that wrote us off as expendable? Why should we save people who were willing to watch us die? Through the communication channel, he could hear murmurs of agreement from various ships. Here's why, Minho continued. The Council abandoned us because they thought we were weak, primitive, not worth saving. But we're not doing this to prove them wrong. We're doing this because it's right. Because when innocent people are dying, humans don't ask whether they deserve to be saved. We just save them. He looked out at the stars, where distant flashes of light marked civilizations fighting for their lives. That's what makes us human. Not our technology or our weapons or our strategies. It's our willingness to walk into the fire when everything depends on it, even for people who wouldn't do the same for us. The response from the fleet was immediate. Ship after ship reported ready for action, their crews preparing to risk everything one more time. As the human fleet set course for Council space, they carried with them a simple truth that would reshape the galaxy. Sometimes the species everyone considers primitive possesses something more valuable than advanced technology, the courage to do what's right regardless of the cost. The end.